Let's restore a trailer. So here's a new project. This is an 18-foot, I don't know how old, utility trailer, car hauler, I guess. It says tow and go, and you can't really read any of this mess on here anymore anyway, but I'm sure it was expensive. And as you guys probably know, trailers are costing an absolute fortune right now with the price of steel and all that goodness. And yep, this would have been a wood floor trailer at one point, but instead of replacing the floor, they just put 2 strips of this like catwalk grates in it, which I love, except for if you're working on something and you drop a bolt or a nut, it falls right through the floor, which can be a good thing too if you put like a UTV or ATV or muddy Jeep or something on there and you go to wash it, it'll go through the floor as well. We're going to overhaul this thing. These are the wheels and tires that were on it. These are actually some old trailer tires, and then that's an old truck tire. That's a truck tire. They don't match. They're ancient, unsafe at any speed. But I do love, it has 5,200 pound axles, already has the brake assemblies on them. The fenders are in almost perfect shape. Just a little scratch right there. I'll probably buff on that some. None of the lights work. I don't think the brakes work. This box is actually bolted on the front, and I kind of dig it. Gonna need a new latch. This I do not like, an Atwood style hitch. It is 2 5/16, but we'll probably end up cutting this off and doing a bulldog or bull nose. I'm not sure what the right term is. After I remove the wheels and tires, and I kind of want to get an idea of what's going on here and pull the shoes off. These don't look terrible, and they're not oil filled, so even if you have a little groove in there for where the seal goes and you put new grease seals on them, probably be okay. But I think I just want to do new stuff in them. For what I have in this trailer, if I have to throw a couple of $1,000 at it, I'm still in pretty good shape, because this would be, I mean, a steel floor 18-foot car hauler will cost you $4,500. And we'll come up with some ramps too. I'm thinking aluminum 6-footers. That way we have a little gradual slope, because if we haul the old Ford, it's not super low, but I'd like to even be able to load something like the Z and not stress about it. First stop on our trailer part gathering is going to be some wheels and tires from an area that is not sketchy at all. But hey, good prices. Take some risk. Try to get in here out of the wind. That was a huge score. These tires were takeoffs from a new trailer that someone wanted to upgrade or change color. So they were extremely reasonable. Also a 7,000 pound weld on drop leg jack and a 2 5/16 hitch or coupler or whatever you want to call it that we'll weld on also. So far so good. Now, you guys may remember this place from when we fixed our boat trailer, so we're gonna go in there and see what else we can find. While that was fun, it sure was painful on the wallet. Now the work can begin. I'm thinking the next step, we start doing the suspension work. Before we do anything, I'm just gonna cut these fenders off, because we're not gonna reuse them anyway. That'll give me a little easier access. Might not want to let that down too far until I cut those wires. So what I've done is remove the old fender mounts and try to clean that up some. We're gonna have to weld some new ones a little farther back, because these are, I think 72 inches or something like that, and the other ones were 66 inches. Anyway, that's gonna give us a little more clearance. These are the rear and the front hangers are the same. They're shorter than the center, which I don't care for that. I'm not sure what spec they were following, but I'm sure in some book somewhere it says that it's fine. Also, they were 30 inches from center to center on this bolt, and 60 inches complete front to back. It's actually supposed to only be 29.5 inches from this bolt to the center right there. And then I'm gonna fix that with these guys. And I know a lot of people will say, why didn't you cut these off and just buy the full length ones? And there's a couple things really. There's really good penetration on this weld, and it's all the way around the bracket. And I'm afraid if I go to grinding and cutting on that, I'm gonna be diminishing some of the frame itself. And I think there'll be a little structural rigidity of having this in the middle to keep any kind of twisting or rotational force, which there shouldn't be any of that. It should just be straight up and down, which in that case, as long as I make a pretty decent bead, this will be fine. Went ahead and did some welding on the inside and both sides, and I ground this off smooth a little bit so we can kind of get a nice clean paint job on this end of it. I did not bother grinding on that one. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that other side out since we've got it mocked up anyway. Essentially, this is just rinse and repeat 3 more times on those other mounts, and then we'll move on to the hubs. I use this Steel It stuff. It's stainless steel paint that you can weld through and paint it on these brackets, weld them on, and then wherever I can get paint in should make some good coverage. Since these are now at the 29.5 center to center spec, we can see about our depth or distance from the bottom of the frame to the center of the tube is supposed to be 4.5 inches, so we're right where we need to be on those. Here's a pro tip for this video. Because this can be so greasy putting these back together, you want to do at least both sides at once when it comes to setting up the bearings and races with grease, because it's a real mess. One of the things you want to point out, these are directional, these backing plates. If you think about how this magnet works, if the tire is turning this direction going forward and you engage the brakes, this magnet is going to try to stop with that outer hub, which is going to pull it back this direction, which would in turn open up these brake shoes and create pressure on the outside of this drum setup. So if you put them on backwards, which they will bolt on backwards, you'll only have good brakes when you're backing up. This is a rust stop primer. Since we've got that backing plate off, awful easy to get in here now. There's nothing structural here that we're concerned about as far as that cancer rust. One of the things you're going to want to do when you have this greasable type axle is test and make sure it's not clogged. See how that grease came out pretty instantly with not much restriction. Here's one of our kits. These come bagged in twos. You're gonna have the seal for the back of this hub. Then you've got, well, these are kind of in order of how they go. The seal goes on after you drop this bearing in place and put the seal in. And then this bearing will go on the front like you saw on the other one. One thing it doesn't come with is that new washer, so we're gonna have to make sure we keep it from the existing ones and the castle nut. And usually you want to put new cotter pins whenever you install these things. You want to wipe out this drum. Probably don't just spray it because you'll end up diluting your grease. Use brake cleaner. Just make sure that you don't have any preservative oil, cosmoline, or whatever they use on these, ever so cautiously. There's going to be a lot of opinions on how much preload to put on this castle nut. Get it set, get it to where you get some resistance when you're snugging that in, and then turn it to the next opening spot where you can drop your cotter pin in there. Make sure it's not in the way of using our greaser. And make sure it's not in the way of our dust cap going on. I don't like these to be dented up because they look awful, and I'd have to buy another one because my OCD just wouldn't tolerate that. So after you've done this 4 times, you move on to the next step. I've got this fender mocked up on jack stands, and basically what I've done first of all is measure the distance from the top of the axle to the frame so I know the maximum amount of travel that this wheel could come up into that fender, and it measures just shy of 3 inches on this one. So with them sitting where they are, I've got 4 1/4, which is more than enough. This one's got about 2 1/2 inches to it. So it was to bottom out. There's about 4 inches clearance there. I like these to be as low as I can get away with, so it's easier to open doors if you have a car or something on the trailer. But what I'd have to do is put a spacer of some type on this frame before I mounted the angle iron that this fender will bolt to, which can certainly take care of, but I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze on that just to gain that extra 1.5 inches. So now that I've got this in place, I can just mark this and know where to weld that angle iron. I'm probably going to want to space it off the trailer far enough to at least keep all the treads inside this fender. I will have to concern myself though with the maximum width. Legal limits and all, I think is 102 inches, so I have to make sure that that doesn't exceed it. I also, now that I have this where it's going to live, need to make a mark here and set some kind of a bracket that can kind of just pinch this inner fender into, like some kind of a V-shaped situation. Maybe just give it a little bit of rigidity from flexing. It'll also help if someone stands on it here. It'll keep it from wanting to flex in there. I may end up having to weld a support rod inside here, which, you know, I would knock it out right away, except this is powder coat and not paint. It's not something that easy to touch up, so we'll send it for now, and then if we need to later, we'll build us a strut. We can start on the front now that the fenders are buttoned up. I did just kind of want to show you guys where I just drilled and bolted that. And I took a piece of angle iron and welded it to where this backing plate just rests perfectly in that V. There you go. If we ever need to add a strut rod to the outside edge of that fender, that'll give it a little bit more support so it doesn't want to pivot. So I'm going to have to cut this off to mount that new jack because it's going to have to situate about here so it doesn't hit the toolbox and you can still open your tailgate without making contact. We're also going to cut this tongue off and put that bulldog hitch on. Well, that's welded. I'm not completely in love with it, but we got it done. It was no issue with the jack at all, but because the angle of these didn't exactly match that hitch, we had to do a little weld stacking on some of it to get make sure we had good attachment. There's plenty of material on there to work with and should give it all the strength it needs. So we're ready to sandblast and paint. This is by far the worst part of the entire project. You just get sand everywhere. And while I'm waiting for my compressor to catch up and refill that air tank, I'm using a DA sander with 80 grit to get just a nice smooth finish on the outside. Then put the trailer back together somewhat, pull it back inside for paint. This is what we're going to spray it with. It has primer built in, so it's great to put on bare metal. I've used it, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times. The plan is to spray everything underneath and inside the frame rails first, the axle tubes, and then kind of prep the outside of the frame rails with lacquer thinner and a rag and wipe it down because it needs to look nice. So we'll do the exterior last. A couple coats till it's covered well. Let it cure and then put this baby back together. Pretty common mistake people make when they're using like rattle cans to paint something is trying to get coverage on the first pass, which is never a good idea. Kind of dry spray at one time and work your way up to full coverage coats. Otherwise, it may never cure. You'll always get that tacky, gummy feel to it. Or it may fisheye or something if maybe it had some grease on it and now you just pounded a bunch of paint on top of that you've got to wipe off with lacquer thinner or something of the like. How's my hair? So our trailer sat outside for about 18 hours before it started raining on it. But it was above 70 degrees and kind of windy. And now it's soaking wet, which is perfect for doing the wiring. Here's a look at what we're going to install. Everything is LED and it's kind of back to front here. You do have to have these 3 lights marked if your trailer's over, I think, 80 inches wide or somewhere in that range. These are the tail lights. Now, they're both right-hand tail lights because in our state, we're not required to have a license plate on the left side. So I didn't buy a left side tail light. It would have had a bright light on the bottom to shine on the tag. These will go on the back sides of the fender. Red is supposed to be, I guess, behind the axle, and like amber is in front of the axles. The trailer already had holes like blown out for these markers. It's kind of redundant. If you have these, you don't need those up to at least a certain length that we're under. But we'll have them anyway. It'll look dope at nighttime. Also got a new connection for our cord, which is metal. I'm not sure if that's great or not. Some people say they'd rather have plastic inside the plastic sleeve on your truck. Either way, I like it. It's kind of like an easy ergonomic grip. And we're installing it. As usual, we're going to use the crimp and seal connectors with the heat gun. Also, I may put this sleeve over the wiring harness. That way it'll kind of prevent any chafing on that rubber. Be pretty simple to install. You guys have seen me do that a dozen times if you watch these truck builds on the channel, which if you haven't, I recommend you go watch those. Whoever had done the wiring originally had just draped it across these bars, and some of them were even in between the grates across these beams, which is no bueno. I went ahead and just drilled like 6 spots through that C-channel and put these zip ties in there so we can attach the wiring harness inside this frame rail from the very front. Should keep everything protected. I used several of them along the axles. And I was gonna redo the original wiring harness, but whenever I tore apart some of the electrical tape to put a shrink connector instead of a Scotch lock, ants started crawling out of the harness. And no, we're getting new. Yep. So after putting this loom over that trailer wire kit, by the way, I bought the 4-wire setup and then added a blue wire for the brake output from the truck to the electric brakes. And 4 is all we really need for this trailer because we're not going to take advantage of the charge line. We also don't have reverse lights, so we didn't have to use that either. Which if you buy the big expensive cords, they come with all 7 wires in them. It wasn't really necessary for this application. One interesting thing, pro tip, whatever you want to call it, about like these LEDs. Well, these specifically, the wiring harness have a ground loop made to them. But LED lights and these brake hubs, they don't care which one you do, power or ground, they'll work. For instance, these lights, they have two wires coming out of the back. As long as you ground one and send 12 volts to the other, it's gonna work. So you don't have to stress too much about that. Oh, you can see these all do, by the way, have the crimp and seal connections on them. And then everything is tied up nice and tidy along these frame rails. I'm using my trusty battery charger. I've got the ground to this ground position. I can hear them buzzing. Yep, you guys remember there's that little motion from those actuators where they magnetize against these drums, and it takes just a little bit of force, and then they expand the shoes out when you roll them forward. Yep. Yep. And I've just dummied in all these indicator lights before getting too overzealous with the fender hanging. Heard those things let go. Stay there, buddy. Yeah, so there's that indicator. This one. This one. This one. And this one. Okay. Oh, and I went ahead and mounted this box back on the front. That was it. Slamming shut. So now that all these are done, put the wheels and tires, fenders back on, pull it forward, and then tie in these tail lights. Final light check now that we've got them all wired up. Just running lights is all that's on. But I did check and make sure that these turn signals work. There's our 3 in the back. Makes us all legal because of our width. So that's good to go. Our last step is putting on this reflective tape. It's kind of a DOT thing. We're not probably hauling much over 10,000 pounds, and I don't know, our trailer probably falls under the limits of this being a requirement, but it looks super cool, so we're putting it on there. I think these were less than 20 bucks for a whole packet of these on Amazon. So definitely inexpensive, but certainly make you more visible at day and night. And here's the finished product. That's our spokes model for trailer manufacturing. Decals are on, all the wiring's done, all the paint's done. I will probably come up with something to coat this grating with a little bit better, but I don't want to use 72 cans of paint. Our box is on and done. Our new latch is in place, so we can hang a lock on there now. It's pretty cool to have that storage. Mistakes may have been made about mounting this leg. I'll probably end up having to cut it off and raise it up about 4 inches because I don't like how much clearance it has. Also, I didn't think I really showed you guys, I welded this strap on the front of these frame rails so the chain can just kind of drape between there. I kind of like it can move from that position, but I may end up welding a loop on the front of it and letting the chain hang from that. Just not sure what I want to do yet. New couplers you guys saw. I did straighten up all the stake pockets before we painted it and sandblasted and all that good stuff. That reflective tape is on there. This baby looks good, ready to travel. 10,400 pound total capacity and 18-foot length, 82 inches or so between the fenders, but they're pretty easily removable if you needed to max that out to drive something on. I appreciate you guys watching. If you stuck around for this long, always like mixing it up, doing something new, doing something fun and cool. Hope you guys learned something. A list of the things that we bought, links and everything will not be in the description. You'll just have to watch the video again and see where I bought everything from, or not. See you later.